Bienvenido a Oscuras Revelaciones. Este es el santuario oscuro, donde la luna es testigo de secretos inconfesables y verdades perturbadoras. Aquí se desvelan historias tan sombrías y desgarradoras que desafían cualquier límite humano. Cada relato que escucharás te sumergirá más profundamente en un mundo donde el horror se manifiesta sin restricciones, donde las verdades más crueles son reveladas bajo el amparo siniestro de la oscuridad eterna. Prepárate, porque una vez que empieces a escuchar, ya no habrá vuelta atrás. Solitude was the currency I sought, the rare metal mined from the deep veins of the Rockies, and I, Elias, was a prospector greedy for its quiet gleam. The wilderness had always been my confessional, my sanctuary, the place where the static of ordinary life dissolved into the vast, indifferent hum of nature. A week unfurled before me, a blank map inviting exploration, and I chose a notoriously demanding trail, a jagged line promising exhaustion and exhilaration in equal measure. For 3 days, the mountains delivered. Sunlight fractured through pine needles. The air tasted like iced water, and the silence was broken only by the percussion of my own boots, the sigh of wind through high passes, or the distant cameo of wildlife. Deer melting into aspen groves, the dark comma of a bear on a faraway slope, an eagle etching slow circles on the infinite blue. Then came the fourth dusk, and the predator I hadn't packed repellent for. My camp was a modest haven nestled beside a brook whose chatter filled the cooling air. Firelight painted dancing shadows on the surrounding pines as I savored the simple ritual of a rehydrated meal. It was then that the harmony shattered. Voices, human voices, alien and sharp, slicing through the twilight tranquility from somewhere deeper in the woods. Hikers? Improbable, this far from any trailhead. I hadn't crossed paths with another soul since leaving the ranger station. An undercurrent in their tone, a strained urgency laced with anger, coiled cold dread in my stomach. Instinct screamed. I smothered the fire, plunging the clearing into abrupt darkness, and melted back towards my tent, ears straining against the brook's murmur. Closer now, 2 distinct timbres emerged from the gloom. One, a low growl like stones grinding together. The other, stretched thin and fraying with panic. "Gotta push on," the gravelly voice grated. "They'll be sniffing around here soon enough." "Can't," came the higher-pitched whine. "Legs are shot. We've been walking forever." "You want to taste prison chow again? 'Cause that's the next stop if they snag us. Now move." Prison. The word landed like a dropped stone in a deep well. Not lost souls, but hunted ones. Fugitives. My breath hitched as their heavy footfalls neared. A blade of light from a flashlight slashed across the nylon skin of my tent. The gruff voice swore, low and vicious. "Someone's bedded down here. Recent." "So, ain't seen nobody." "Don't matter. Mouths flap. We find 'em." My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs, a drumbeat surely audible over the water's song. Escape. But how? My vehicle sat parked 2 days' hard trek away. In this consuming darkness, I was blind prey. Soundlessly, a ghost in my own camp, I slithered from the tent's rear flap, backpack clutched tight. They were circling the front, their flashlight beams stabbing nervously through the trees. I edged away, letting the brook's gurgle swallow the rustle of my retreat. 50 yards, perhaps, before a harsh shout ripped the night. "Hey! Over there! Someone's running!" Then only flight. Raw, adrenaline-fueled motion. Branches lashed my face like whips. Unseen roots threatened to snare my ankles. Behind me, the crashing sounds of pursuit, closer than my own ragged breathing. Direction dissolved. The only compass point was away. Time warped. Minutes or an eternity, I couldn't tell. Lungs burned, legs turned to leaden weights, but the phantom touch of rough hands seizing me propelled me onward. Finally, my body rebelled. I staggered, collapsing against a tree trunk, air tearing through my throat in ragged gasps. Silence pressed in, thick and watchful. Had I outrun them? As the roaring in my ears subsided, the grim reality settled. Lost, alone, stripped of shelter and supplies, save for the meager contents of my pack. Water, a couple of energy bars, a torch, a first aid kit. And somewhere in the vast, breathing darkness, violent men might still be searching. I needed cover, a moment to think. My night-adjusted eyes discerned a shape nearby, a colossal fallen log, its uprooted base forming a dark cavity, a wound in the earth fringed with tangled roots. Not comfort, but concealment. I wriggled into the earthen hollow, curling fetal small. Every nocturnal sound became a threat, an owl's questioning hoot, the whisper of wind stirring the canopy. Each rustle could be them. Adrenaline ebbed, leaving a residue of profound weariness. Fear warred with exhaustion, and exhaustion eventually won. I must have drifted into a shallow, uneasy sleep, for the next awareness was of pale sunlight filtering through the lattice of roots above me. Cautiously, I peered out. The forest floor lay dappled and serene in the dawn, empty of menace, but the reprieve felt fragile. I needed a plan. Back to the car seemed the only route, a desperate gamble without proper gear, and the fugitives still a chilling possibility. As I wrestled with my options, a new sound intruded, growing steadily louder, the rhythmic whump 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 of helicopter blades beating the air. Rescue or law enforcement hunting their quarry? Hope surged. I scrambled from my root-bound den, scanning the canopy for a gap, a clearing where I might be seen. Then, more voices, different this time, crisp and organized, carrying on the morning air. Alpha Team, sweep east quadrant. Beta, cover west. Subjects considered dangerous. Repeat, dangerous. Do not engage solo. Relief washed over me, potent and dizzying. The police. Safety. I started towards the commands, then froze. If I could hear them, so could the fugitives. What if desperation made them reckless? What if they sought leverage? My fear solidified into certainty as frantic rustling erupted behind me. I spun. There they were, the pair from the night, eyes wide with cornered animal panic. The gruff one, Silas, locked onto me, his gaze hardening. "You," he snarled, voice raw. "You called them down on us, didn't ya?" I retreated, palms raised in a gesture of surrender. "No, listen, I'm just hiking. I don't want any trouble." Too late. Trouble found you. Silas advanced, a predator closing distance. "Looks like we got ourselves a guide out of this mess." Silas?" The other man, Finn, shifted nervously. Maybe we just bolt?" "Shut it, Finn," Silas snapped, his attention snapping back to me. "You're coming with us. One twitch, you'll wish you hadn't." My thoughts raced, frantic as trapped birds. Hostage? No. But they were larger, likely armed. I needed time, needed the closing net of the search teams. "Okay." I forced the word out, aiming for calm. "Okay, I'll come. But my pack, I dropped it back there. Got water, food. We'll need it if we're dodging cops." Silas hesitated, weighing desperation against need. He gave a curt nod. Fine, but try anything. I led them back towards the fallen log, deliberately slowing my pace, straining to hear the approaching searchers. Closer now. We reached the root hollow. An idea sparked, reckless but immediate. Kneeling, pretending to fumble for the pack hidden within, my fingers instead clawed at the loose soil and leaf litter. In a single fluid motion, I spun and flung the handful of debris straight into Silas's face. He roared, momentarily blinded, staggering back. I didn't linger. I ran, sucking in a huge breath and bellowing with every ounce of air in my lungs. Help! Over here! They're here! The fugitives! The forest exploded. Confused shouts answered my cry, followed by the thunder of multiple boots pounding the earth. Suddenly, figures in dark uniforms materialized from the trees, converging, weapons raised. Police, freeze! I hit the dirt, covering my head. A brief, violent struggle, more shouts, then an abrupt, ringing silence. When I dared to lift my head, Silas and Finn were being marched away, wrists bound. A woman officer with calm eyes knelt beside me, helping me sit up. "You all right, sir?" she asked gently. "Are you the hiker reported missing?" I nodded, a wave of lightheadedness washing over me. "Yes, that's me. They found me." The hours that followed were a haze of debriefings, medics checking me over. Frank and Jimmy, I learned their real names were Silas and Finn, had broken out of a facility 3 states away, leaving a trail of petty crimes across hundreds of miles. As I was finally cleared, the officer in charge, a man with weathered features, clapped me lightly on the shoulder. "You handled yourself well," he said. "Takes guts to think straight under that kind of pressure." A shaky smile touched my lips. Honestly, I was petrified. He gave a short laugh. "That's courage, son. Being scared spitless and doing what needs doing anyway." Driving back towards civilization, the familiar weight of my pack now strangely comforting on the seat beside me, I replayed the last day. I had walked into the mountains seeking peace and stumbled into mortal peril. Yet, somewhere in the terror, I'd unearthed a resilience I hadn't known I possessed. I'd stared down fear and walked away. The wilderness still calls to me, its promise of solitude undimmed. But now, I hike with a new awareness that true danger doesn't always roar or bear claws. Sometimes it whispers on the wind, walks on 2 legs, and the most vital trails we navigate are not on any map, but etched deep within the landscape of our own spirit. Trust your gut when the wild feels wrong. Sometimes the fiercest creature in the forest is the one discovering its own strength. From the first moment encountering Chloe, a warning should have flared. Something flickered behind the warmth in her gaze, an undertow beneath the surface calm. But the intoxication of arrival, the raw thirst for connection in this sprawling alien metropolis, blinded me to the peril masked by her easy grin. 3 days I'd been adrift in Bangkok, the city's relentless symphony, a cacophony of engines, voices, sizzling woks, beginning to fray my nerves. It was a vibrant, bruising embrace, exhilarating and utterly draining. That evening, stumbling into the humid common area of my threadbare hostel, skin slick with sweat, feet aching from temples explored and markets navigated, all I craved was icy solace and a quiet eddy in the human current. And then, she materialized at my elbow. A sudden splash of color in the room's weary palette, a chilled beer condensation beaded in each hand. "Look like you could use one of these," she offered, her voice a bright, unmistakably Australian melody. Gratefully, I took the bottle. Soon, a practiced intimacy unfolded between us. Chloe, a veteran of Southeast Asia's meandering trails, overflowed with anecdotes and insider knowledge. She painted pictures of hidden sanctuaries, street carts serving ambrosial noodles, clandestine bars where locals sought refuge from the tourist tide. "Listen," she murmured, leaning closer after hours had dissolved into shared stories and laughter, her tone conspiratorial. "There's this incredible night market, way off the usual map. Nothing in the guides mentions it. Food that'll change your life, crafts you won't see anywhere else. Fancy it?" A flicker of hesitation. The hour grew late, fatigue tugged at my limbs. But Chloe's effervescence was a contagion, the allure of unveiling a secret facet of Bangkok, a side denied to the casual observer, proved irresistible. "Okay," I heard myself agree, silencing the serpent of doubt coiled in my gut. "Let's go." We hailed a sputtering tuk-tuk, a three-wheeled chariot that careened through the thronged avenues with heart-stopping agility. I registered our trajectory away from the city's glittering core, plunging into districts less polished, buildings slumped under the weight of years, their facades peeling like old sunburn. Chloe, however, maintained a buoyant monologue, narrating sights, recounting escapades in distant Vietnam, and I consciously pushed aside the rising tide of unease. Finally, the vehicle deposited us onto a street breathing shadows. Paint-starved structures loomed, faded and worn. A scattering of figures moved with quiet purpose, a stark contrast to the boisterous markets etched in my memory and guidebook pages. "Are you certain this is it?" I asked, the uncertainty in my voice echoing the dim surroundings. Chloe nodded, eyes gleaming with manufactured excitement. "Absolutely. Just down this way. Come on." She pulled me into a constricted alleyway, the city's roar abruptly muffled. Buildings leaned inwards, casting deep shadows. The air grew heavy, cloying. Just as the urge to retreat became insistent, the passage unexpectedly bled into a small, desolate square. A handful of stalls displayed unfamiliar produce. An elderly woman presided over a vast, steaming cauldron emitting pungent, spicy aromas. It bore no resemblance to the vibrant nocturnal bazaars I'd envisioned. "Let's get a drink. Wait for it to liven up," Chloe suggested, guiding me towards a low-lit bar squatting in a corner. Inside, the air was stale. A couple of local men nursed beers in silence. We claimed stools at the bar, and Chloe ordered effortlessly in fluid Thai. The proprietor, a burly man with a face carved from river stone and eyes like chips of obsidian, grunted, setting 2 glasses of crystalline liquid before us. "Cheers," Chloe toasted, lifting her glass. I mirrored the gesture, taking a tentative sip. The liquor traced a fiery path down my throat, settling into a deceptive warmth. We talked, Chloe spinning more tales of her journeys, but time stretched strangely. The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet, reality warping at the edges. My thoughts grew viscous, difficult to grasp. A glance at my watch revealed barely 30 minutes had elapsed. It felt like an eternity trapped in that dim, stagnant space. "I think... need some air," I slurred, the words clumsy on my tongue, thick and uncooperative. Chloe's face swam before me, her smile sharpening, morphing into a predator's grin. "Oh, darling," she cooed, her voice seeming to echo from a great distance. "I really don't think you're going anywhere. Ice bloomed in my veins as comprehension detonated within me. The drink, laced, poisoned. I tried to rise, but my legs buckled, refusing commands. The room spun into a nauseating vortex, and I felt myself sliding, falling. Strong hands intercepted my descent before I struck the floor. Through the rapidly thickening fog clouding my vision, I saw the stone-faced bartender emerge. He and Chloe exchanged clipped phrases in Thai, their tones chillingly pragmatic, like merchants finalizing a deal. A silent scream clawed at my throat. The instinct to fight, to flee, warred with a body suddenly disconnected from my will. The last image imprinted on my mind before the blackness swallowed me whole was Chloe's face. The friendly mask dissolved, revealing something cold, calculating, and utterly devoid of humanity. I surfaced into pain and shadow. My skull pulsed with agony. My mouth felt like cracked desert earth, and a profound ache resonated through every muscle. Movement brought the sharp bite of restraints. My wrists and ankles were bound. Panic, cold and sharp, seized me as the fragments coalesced. Chloe, the desolate bar, the treacherous drink. As my eyes slowly adapted to the oppressive gloom, I discerned the outlines of a small, stark room. The air hung hot and lifeless, thick with the smell of dust and something else, something vaguely chemical. Muffled sounds seeped in from beyond, the distant hum of traffic perhaps, or indistinct voices. The creak of a door sliced through the stillness, spilling harsh fluorescent light into the space. I winced against the sudden glare, making out two silhouettes framed in the opening. One was Chloe, the other, a man I didn't recognize. Tall, broad, his features impassive as granite. "Ah," the man intoned, his English heavily accented, guttural. "Our little bird awakens." Chloe lingered near the threshold, her gaze averted. The man advanced, crouching before me. His fingers clamped onto my chin, a rough, impersonal grip forcing my head up. "You have become," he stated flatly, "an inconvenience. Your embassy makes inquiries. Your family plagues the hotels. Most untidy." I strained to form words, but my tongue felt swollen, alien in my mouth. He emitted a short, dry chuckle, utterly devoid of mirth. "Do not trouble yourself. You will cease to be our problem shortly. There are those who pay well for pretty cargo like you. A factory, perhaps. A house of pleasure. The destinations are varied." A chasm of hopelessness opened beneath me as the full, monstrous reality crashed down. Not robbery, not a simple scam. This was the abyss, human trafficking, and I was the merchandise. The man straightened, dusting his hands dismissively as if he'd touched something unclean. "Prepare her for transfer," he instructed Chloe. "The buyers arrive within the hour." The door clicked shut, plunging me back into darkness and suffocating despair. How could I have been so utterly naive, so completely seduced by Chloe's manufactured charm? But as the initial shockwave receded, a different fire ignited within me, the cold burn of survival. I would not surrender. I began to saw at the rough fibers binding my wrists, ignoring the searing pain as the rope bit into flesh. Time became elastic, immeasurable. Minutes or hours I couldn't know. Finally, a loosening, a subtle give. With a surge of desperate strength, one hand slipped free. At that precise moment, footsteps echoed outside. Swiftly, I rearranged myself, concealing my liberated hand. The door swung open again. Chloe entered, alone this time. She still refused to meet my eyes as she approached. holding a plastic bottle of water. "Drink," she said, her voice toneless, stripped of all affect. "Long journey." As she leaned down, offering the bottle to my lips, I moved. Channeling every ounce of remaining strength, I swung my freed hand, the blow connecting solidly with her jaw. She staggered back, pure shock momentarily erasing the blankness from her face. I didn't hesitate. I launched myself forward, driving her to the floor. We wrestled in grim silence, a frantic, desperate struggle where any sound meant summoning the others. My desperation, raw and primal, ultimately prevailed. My hands found her throat, squeezing, holding until her struggles ceased. Her eyes rolled back, and she went limp beneath me. Trembling violently, I fumbled through her pockets, discovering a small, sharp knife. I sliced through the remaining ropes binding my ankles, then crept to the door, straining to hear. The corridor beyond lay silent. My escape is a fractured montage of flight and fear. Shadows embraced, hallways navigated on trembling legs, breath held at every creak and distant noise, culminating in a grimy window, barely wide enough to squeeze through. I ran, stumbling through unfamiliar streets, oblivious to the stares of nocturnal passers-by, propelled by sheer terror until the reassuring blue light of a police station emerged from the urban haze. The ensuing days blurred into a bureaucratic whirlwind. Endless questions, sterile embassy offices, tear-choked calls relaying the unbelievable to my family oceans away. They apprehended Chloe and her granite-faced associate eventually. The police informed me I wasn't their first quarry, merely one of the vanishingly few who had clawed their way back from the edge. The knowledge offered cold comfort. Boarding the aircraft bound for home, I felt irrevocably altered, as though a vital part of me remained trapped in that lightless room. The architecture of my trust lay fractured. My belief in inherent human decency had bled out onto that dusty floor. The physical scars left by the ropes have long since vanished, but the internal wounds endure. I still journey, still chase the horizon, still seek the spark of human connection. Yet a sentinel stands perpetual guard within me now, scanning every friendly face, listening for the dissonant note beneath the laughter. For I learned, in the most brutal of classrooms, that the deepest darkness can hide behind the most welcoming eyes, that the deadliest predators sometimes arrive bearing gifts and promises of undiscovered worlds. A shriek of rubber tortured the asphalt, cleaving the night, and in that fissure, the trajectory of my existence irrevocably shifted. What began as a mundane passage through somnolent streets warped into a primal scramble for life itself, where umbra writhed with unseen menace, and each choice bore the crushing gravity of survival. Midnight had bled into the new day. I piloted my car through Havenwood, a town slumbering deep, returning from a draining shift at a clinic 2 counties distant. Emptiness reigned, the tarmac illuminated only by the sparse sodium glow of streetlights and the twin beams slicing ahead. Weariness settled bone deep, my thoughts already drifting toward the beckoning solace of my bed. Then, starkly limned in the high-beam glare, violence unfolding in an alley flanking the town's solitary bank. 2 figures grappled, a brutal ballet. One man's arm snaked around the other's throat. Even across the distance, steel flashed. A knife's cold crescent. Impulse overriding reason, my foot slammed the brake. The car protested, tires howling before shuddering to a halt. For an atom of time, stillness descended. Both combatants pivoted, heads snapping towards my intrusion. I glimpsed pure panic flare in the aggressor's eyes. Then, pandemonium. The knife wielder flung his captive aside, a discarded puppet, and vanished into the alley's maw. His counterpart lurched upright, hands clawing at his neck, ragged gasps tearing the silence. Prudence screamed, "Drive away. Call the authorities. Let professionals intervene." Yet, the healer ingrained within me refused to abandon potential injury. My door clicked open. Phone already in hand, poised to dial for aid, I stepped out. "Are you all right?" My voice, tentative, bridged the space between us. "I'm a nurse. Can I help?" Cautiously, I advanced. He looked up and the world tilted. A terrible clarity dawned. No fear softened his gaze, no flicker of relief. Only glacial, calculating fury resided there. Before thought could translate to action, he surged forward. His fingers clamped around my wrist, a vice promising bruises. "Shouldn't have stopped," he rasped, wrenching my arm painfully behind me. Cold metal kissed the side of my neck, the blade I'd seen moments before. "You're coming with us." Us. The word coiled like a serpent in my gut. No assault this. A performance, meticulously staged to ensnare precisely the kind of compassionate fool I'd proven myself to be. Hook, line, sinker. From the alley's shadowed recesses, the other man materialized, a predator's grin splitting his face, eyes gleaming with an avarice that turned my blood to ice. "Well now," his voice purred, low and freighted with threat. "Seems we netted ourselves a little savior." They propelled me towards my own vehicle, the knife's edge a constant chilling pressure against my skin. "You drive," commanded the first man. Silas, I would later learn his name was, though Mace, the grinning one, felt somehow more immediately dangerous. He thrust me into the driver's seat. "Try anything at all," Silas warned, his voice flat. "And this blade meets your throat before you draw breath." We peeled away from the curb, Havenwood's familiar streets dissolving into a meaningless blur. My thoughts, frantic birds trapped in a cage, beat against the confines of my skull. Where? What purpose? Their directions, terse commands, led us inexorably towards the town's fringe, towards the tangled network of back roads threading the deep woods. "This way," Mace barked from the passenger seat, jabbing a finger towards a narrow dirt track, nearly invisible until we were upon it. Asphalt surrendered to gravel, gravel to raw earth. Deeper we plunged into the arboreal darkness. Overhanging limbs clawed at the car's roof. The uneven ground bucked and jolted beneath us. Finally, a small clearing materialized from the gloom. Before us stood a cabin, ancient and derelict, its windows like vacant eyes staring into the night. My captors hustled me from the car, the knife now nudging my lower back, urging me towards the decaying structure. Inside, the air hung thick with the miasma of damp rot and neglect. Austerity defined the space, skeletal chairs, a table littered with maps and documents, and in one corner, an object that arrested my heart mid-beat, a formidable metal safe. Its heavy door swung wide, revealing untidy stacks of currency, glittering heaps of jewelry. "Welcome," Silas sneered, the sound slick with malice. "You just wandered into the aftermath of the biggest bank job this county's ever known." The brutal truth struck with physical force, not mere opportunistic thugs. These were organized, desperate men. And I was a complication, a witness they could ill afford to release. Hours bled together as I sat, lashed to a chair, a captive audience to their volatile debate. Mace argued for swift, silent finality. Silas, more pragmatic, considered my potential value as leverage should their escape unravel. Through the fog of terror, my mind strained, desperately seeking any filament of hope, any fissure through which escape might be possible. Deliverance arrived not through cunning, but through elemental fury. A deafening crack of thunder detonated overhead, rattling the flimsy cabin, making all three of us flinch violently. Instants later, the heavens opened. Rain hammered the tin roof, a relentless, drowning percussion. In the ensuing disarray, a fleeting chance, I hurled myself backward with every ounce of strength. The antique chair, weakened by decay, splintered beneath the impact. Before Silas or Mace could fully register the sudden shift, I scrambled upright, hands still bound but liberated from the wreckage. I bolted, crashing through the cabin's inadequate back door and out into the tempest-riven night. The deluge was both shield and impediment. Rain sheeted down, blurring vision, transforming the forest floor into treacherous slurry, yet simultaneously muffling my frantic flight and cleansing the earth of my passage. Blindly, I ran. Branches lashed my face like whips. Unseen roots conspired to ensnare my feet. Behind, muffled shouts, the crashing sounds of pursuit. They were coming. They knew this terrain intimately. Panic, cold and sharp, threatened to engulf me, but I fought it back, fueled by sheer primal will. Lost, utterly alone, pursued by mortal danger, yet refusal burned fierce within me. Time dissolved in the sodden, lightless labyrinth. How long I ran remains unknown. Each rustle, each snap of a twig sent jolts of adrenaline through me, bracing for the bite of steel, the impact of lead. Yet, impossibly, I endured. Then, just as exhaustion threatened utter collapse, a glimmer through the dense weave of trees. Lights. Closer, closer. The unmistakable ribbon of a highway. Relief surged, a potent wave lending final impetus to my failing legs. I burst from the tree line onto the road's shoulder, waving my bound hands with frantic desperation at the approaching headlights. Tires screamed again, this time a sound of salvation, not doom. For one heart-stopping second, fear spiked. Them? But a car door opened and a woman peered out, her expression etched with concern. "My God," she breathed, her eyes taking in my drenched, disheveled state, the ropes chafing my wrists. What on earth happened? The story tumbled out, a torrent of words punctuated by ragged breaths, as she produced a small knife from her pocket and sliced through my bonds. Before I'd finished recounting the ordeal, she was speaking urgently into her phone, relaying our position, detailing the nightmare I'd escaped. The subsequent hours unfolded in a disorienting kaleidoscope of flashing emergency lights and probing questions. Law enforcement saturated the woods. By dawn, the dilapidated cabin stood exposed, one of my captors apprehended within its decaying walls. Mace remained elusive, swallowed by the forest, but the evidence recovered rendered his eventual capture inevitable. Wrapped in the cocoon of a shock blanket in the back of an ambulance, I watched the sun ascend over Havenwood. The town stirred, oblivious to the nocturnal terrors that had played out on its quiet periphery. Lives resumed their familiar rhythms, but for me, the world had irrevocably fractured. Familiar landscapes now pulsed with latent threat, shadows concealing unknown dangers. Yet, paradoxically, life itself felt intensely, fiercely precious. I had confronted mortality and emerged, scarred but breathing. Within the crucible of fear, I had unearthed a resilience I never knew I possessed. In the days and weeks that followed, the depositions, the courtroom testimonies, I was labeled a hero. The word felt hollow, ill-fitting. I was a survivor, nothing more, nothing less. Someone flung into the abyss who had somehow clawed her way back. The experience etched itself deep, altering me in ways still unfurling. Caution is now my constant companion, awareness my shield. But alongside the vigilance grows a profound appreciation for the mundane miracles. A quiet evening undisturbed, a walk beneath open sky, free from the prickle of unseen eyes, the simple, profound luxury of feeling safe. Sometimes, in the deep quiet of night, the phantom echo of footsteps pounding through rain-soaked woods still finds me. But I anchor myself to the present, to the knowledge of my survival. And in that space, a fierce pride takes root, entwined with gratitude for the strength discovered in that night of terror. The shriek of tires that began it all still resonates, a chilling memory, yet transformed. It is no longer solely a harbinger of fear, but a marker, the brutal overture to the night I learned the depths of my own endurance, the night I truly understood what it meant to survive. "10 minutes, a sliver of time carved out post-shift, a necessity after the clamor of the bistro, the symphony of clattering plates and insistent demands. Just 10 minutes cocooned in my sedan, letting the day's static exhale from my pores while the digital scroll offered its fleeting balm. It was my ritual, this brief suspension between public performance and private obligations, the looming mountain of coursework awaiting me indoors. My chosen spot, curbside before our house, offered the porch light's familiar gleam, yet remained cradled in enough shadow to feel sequestered. Miriam, my mother, found the habit peculiar, this pause on the threshold. She couldn't grasp how these solitary breaths recalibrated my world. Tonight, however, the air itself felt altered. Autumn's usual crispness had thickened, pressing against the glass like a held breath. A flicker danced on my phone's screen, a reflection from the darkness pooling behind the car, something amorphous, kinetic, hovering at vision's periphery. A sharp turn of my head revealed only the familiar tableau, our quiet suburban lane, deserted save for Agnes Holloway promenading with her diminutive terrier. Her wave was a small, bright punctuation mark in the twilight. I mirrored the gesture, attempting to dispel the subtle dissonance humming beneath my skin. Back to the endless stream of videos, the mindless escape. Yet awareness had sharpened its focus. Every sound gained significance. The metallic tick-tick of the cooling engine block, the papery rustle of fallen leaves skittering across asphalt, the distant clatter of a bin lid disturbed by some nocturnal creature. The shadows in the rearview mirror seemed to possess an unusual depth, an inkier quality. Then, movement snagged my attention again, starker this time. A distinct shape in the side mirror's convex gleam, a figure dropping low behind my vehicle. Ice bloomed in my chest, my fingers scrabbling for the ignition keys, poised for a desperate sprint toward the sanctuary of the house. Before thought could translate into action, our front door flew inward. Miriam erupted onto the porch, arms windmilling in frantic semaphore. "Elara, inside, now!" Her voice was stretched thin, laced with a terror I'd never heard. No hesitation. Bag slung over my shoulder, I bolted, clearing the porch steps in a single bound. Inside, the deadbolt slammed home, Miriam's hands trembling as she turned the key. "Someone was watching you," she choked out, pulling me into a crushing embrace. I came for the mail. Saw him crouched right by your window, staring in. He had his phone up, Alara, like he was filming. My legs turned to water as the reality crashed down. How long? How many other evenings had I sat, blissfully unaware, under observation? Minutes later, the cruiser's flashing lights painted the street in stark blue and red. The officers found little beyond impressions in the soft earth flanking my parking spot, and something else that turned my blood to frost. Smudges marring the driver's side window, starkly visible under the beam of a torch. Handprints, face prints, ghostly impressions left in the condensation. Irrefutable proof that someone had pressed close, breathing onto the glass, observing my private refuge. The following day, Julian, my father, installed motion-activated floodlights, bathing the house's perimeter in sudden, stark illumination. Miriam ordered security cameras, synced to deliver alerts directly to our phones. My brother, Reese, helped me apply a dark tint to my car windows. Visibility outward remained clear, but the view inward was now obscured. Small fortifications, piecemeal efforts to reclaim a sense of inviolability. But the tremor had spread beyond our walls. Agnes Holloway galvanized the street, birthing a neighborhood watch. Neighbors pooled security footage, synchronized dog walking times, noted unfamiliar vehicles. Police patrols intensified during the evening commute hours. At the bistro, my manager reshuffled closing shifts. No one departed alone into the night. Brighter lamps were installed in the staff lot, alongside cameras monitoring every approach. Regular patrons began offering escorts to cars, an unspoken pact of guardianship forming organically. My 10 minutes of decompression persisted, but their geography shifted. Now, I sought refuge in the brightly lit break room, or on our illuminated porch, or within the living room's drawn curtain security. Miriam sometimes joined me, not hovering, but simply present, her quiet companionship a different kind of solace. These moments felt consecrated now, precious not for their solitude, but for their safety. The watcher was never identified, but subsequent police reports sketched a disturbing pattern across town. Similar accounts of young people trailed to their vehicles, unnerving figures glimpsed photographing through windows, spectral handprints discovered on glass panes come morning. Each incident added a brushstroke to a portrait of predatory intrusion. Yet, our neighborhood reacted not with paralysis, but with resolve. Self-defense workshops materialized at the community center. Local shops declared themselves safe havens, places to wait if unease struck. Teenagers absorbed lessons on situational awareness, on honoring the quiet alarm bells of instinct. One morning, I emerged to find the pavement before our house adorned with chalk script, "You are not alone," and further down, "We watch out for each other." The entire street bloomed with these colorful affirmations, a vibrant testament to collective vigilance. Agnes later confessed to mobilizing the middle school art club for the clandestine operation. The ordeal fundamentally reshaped my understanding of private moments. Their necessity remained, anchors in the swirling currents of a demanding life. But I grasped now that true privacy isn't synonymous with isolation. It resides in secure spaces, fortified by the awareness and care of others. Last week, I saw a young woman parked after school, lost in her phone screen. I recognized the posture, the need for that interstitial pause. Instead of merely passing, I lingered at a respectful distance until she looked up. We spoke then about the delicate balance, the importance of staying alert while still tending to one's inner world. My car windows now bear different kinds of prints. Laminated drawings from the bistro's children's art sessions, affirmations scrawled in washable marker, tangible reminders that this space, once compromised, is now consciously protected. Vulnerability transmuted into a canvas for resilience. Sometimes, late, a sudden movement in the periphery will still make me jump. My gaze still flicks to the rearview mirror more often than strictly needed, but these reflexes no longer dictate my state of being. They are reminders to remain present, to trust that visceral knowing, to maintain the boundaries that ensure safety. Because that night taught me privacy isn't a given. It's actively constructed, woven from communal awareness, mutual support, and the courage to transform fear into connection. My 10 minutes of peace feel deeper now, resonant not with solitude, but with the quiet strength of a community standing watch. A peal of laughter, thin and sharp as broken glass, splintered the pre-dawn stillness of the ward. It skittered down the vacant halls, a sound utterly alien to the hushed despair that usually reigned here, raising the fine hairs along my arms. Not the sound of fractured minds finding fleeting amusement. No. This resonance felt ancient, hollow, and profoundly misplaced within the walls of Blackwood Asylum at 2 a.m. 5 years I'd walked these echoing corridors as Nurse Elara Vance, spectral in my white uniform against the decaying grandeur of the institution. The night shift was my domain, a kingdom of shadowed rooms and troubled sleep. I thought I'd navigated the spectrum of human fragility, the sudden tempests of rage, the intricate architecture of delusion, the whole sorrowful catalog. But the tapestry of that night was woven with threads I hadn't known existed. The hours had unfolded with their usual rhythm. Whispered checks, the soft click of medication trays, the groaning sighs of the ancient building settling deeper into its foundations. I sat bathed in the sterile fluorescence of the nurse's station, immersed in the day's annotations, when it began. A murmur of mirth, faint as moth wings against the glass, drifting from the direction of room 237. An anomaly. Silas Croft, the room's occupant, was submerged in prescribed oblivion, far beyond the reach of laughter. My worn shoes whispered on the linoleum as I moved towards the sound. With each step, the giggling swelled, shedding its initial delicacy, twisting into something jagged, almost frantic. A knot of ice formed in my gut. My fingers trembled slightly as they closed around the cold metal of the doorknob. A breath, held and released, before I pushed inward. Darkness greeted me, pierced only by the rhythmic pulse of monitoring lights. Silas Croft was a still effigy in his bed, breathing slow and even. The laughter had vanished, leaving only the electronic pulse, vital steady. Yet, as I turned, a flicker, a peripheral distortion, like heat haze, danced at the edge of vision. I spun, heart hammering a frantic cadence against my ribs. Empty air. Shadows clung to corners, inanimate. Just fatigue, Elara, I chided, the words tasting false on my tongue. The graveyard shift playing its tricks. Returning to the island of light that was the nurse's station offered little solace. The quiet felt porous now, expectant. An unseen weight pressed down. Then the sound returned, this time cascading from the opposite end of the ward. The day room, a cavernous space secured under lock and key until morning. Multiple voices now, a dissonant chorus of amusement. Against the screaming insistence of my own rational mind, I retrieved the keys, their jangle unnaturally loud. The closer I drew, the more the laughter swelled, a phantom gala echoing just beyond the wood. My hand, betraying me with a tremor, guided the key into the lock. The moment the door swung open, silence slammed down like a physical blow. The room stood vacant, chairs stacked like skeletal remains against the far wall. No trace of revelry, yet the atmosphere hummed, thick with recent unseen occupation. I retreated, securing the lock, the metallic click echoing the frantic beat in my chest. What in God's name was happening here? A full sweep. Necessary. Methodical checks might anchor me back to reality. Room by room, the familiar tableau, slumbering forms, the steady green lines on monitors. Yet with each door opened and closed, the sensation of wrongness intensified, a subtle dissonance beneath the surface calm. It culminated in room 252. As I pivoted to leave, my gaze snagged on the far wall. A patch of shadow, impossibly deep, detached itself from the ambient gloom. It flowed, viscous and silent, not a projection, but a presence, gliding with unnerving autonomy. A blink, sharp and involuntary, and it resolved back into the ordinary play of light and dark. Exhaustion, a trick of the weary eye. My mind scrabbled for logical footholds, but a deeper instinct recoiled, recognizing something fundamentally alien. The arrival of Ben Carter, his familiar presence cutting through the oppressive quiet, felt like a lifeline thrown into churning water. "Ben," I began, striving for a neutral tone that cracked around the edges. "Has tonight felt off to you?" His brow furrowed. "Off how, Ilara?" I swallowed, the words feeling foolish even as I spoke them. Sounds, things in the periphery, shadows doing more than just lying still. The easy dismissal I expected didn't come. Instead, a guarded look flickered in his eyes, quickly suppressed. Old building groans, you know how it is. But the deflection was too quick. "Ben, what aren't you saying?" He exhaled slowly, casting a furtive glance down the corridor. "All right, didn't want to sound like I was losing it. But yes, the last few weeks, it's been escalating, things skittering just out of sight, voices like static on the air when no one's talking." He hesitated. "And the patients?" I prompted, dread coiling tighter. "They're seeing them too, even the clearer ones, talking about visitors, things that only stir when the lights go down." Before I could process his words, a shriek tore through the ward's fragile membrane of quiet, high, thin, vibrating with pure terror. Room 224. Isabel Thorne, usually placid under her medication's gentle reign. We sprinted, bursting through her door. Isabel was a knot of fear in the far corner, eyes stretched wide, fixed on something unseen by us. "They've come," she wailed, voice cracking. "Right here. Don't you see them?" I moved towards her slowly, murmuring reassurances. "Isabel, you're safe. There's no one else." Even as the lie left my lips, the shadows in the room seemed to deepen, to writhe. They pooled, gathering substance, hinting at forms not quite human. Isabel's trembling finger shot out, pointing past my shoulder. "Look out!" I whirled, breath catching in my throat. For one crystalline, heart-stopping second, it stood there, a silhouette sculpted from absence, featureless, a void carved into the shape of a man, its edges wavering like smoke. Then it dissolved, bleeding back into the ambient gloom. Ben's face, bleached of all color, mirrored my own shock. "God Almighty," he breathed. What was that? No answer was needed. The overhead lights began a frantic strobe, plunging the room into disorienting flashes of light and utter blackness. An unnatural chill descended, stealing the warmth from the air, our breath pluming white before us. Isabel's whimpers were swallowed by a rising tide of whispers, sourceless yet intimate, brushing against our ears. The shadows pulsed, no longer retreating but advancing, spilling across walls and floor like spilled ink, tendrils unfurling towards us. Something brushed my arm, a touch like frozen bone, utterly definite. Go! The word ripped from my throat. I seized Isabel's arm, Ben grabbing her other, and we plunged back into the corridor. Chaos erupted. Alarms shrieked. Patients screamed from behind locked doors. The darkness surged behind us, a tangible wave down the hallway. We slammed against the main exit doors, sealed fast. "Basement," Ben yelled, voice strained. "Emergency access." We scrambled for the stairwell, the whispers swirling into a cacophony, the encroaching void snapping at our backs. Other frantic footsteps pounded behind us. Panicked staff, terrified patients swept up in the exodus. The basement was a lightless pit, but Ben fumbled along the wall, finding the crash bar. A moment of sickening resistance, then the door burst open, ejecting us into the blessed shock of the cold night. We didn't stop, stumbling across the dew-slicked grass until the relative safety of the distant parking lot tarmac was beneath our feet. Gasping, we looked back. Blackwood Asylum stood silhouetted against the lightening sky, but within its windows, darkness writhed, shapes twisting and turning as if the very structure were being devoured from within. Reality had fractured. The sirens arrived eventually, their flashing lights painting the scene in strokes of garish red and blue. Evacuation. Investigation. Nothing found, of course. How could they find sentient darkness? The official story settled on a convenient fiction. Faulty gas lines, mass hysteria. I tendered my resignation the following day. The thought of re-entering that building was physically sickening. Others followed suit. Blackwood, plagued by the incident and starved of staff brave enough or foolish enough to work its wards, shuttered its doors not long after. Now, when restless nights drive me past its derelict shell, I sometimes pull over, and I listen. Faintly, carried on the wind, I think I hear it. That thin, sharp laughter drifting from the sightless windows. Did we escape, or merely abandon others to that presence? The question haunts me. I have no answers, only the chilling certainty that shadows are never just shadows. They are thresholds. And behind them, patient and hungry, things wait for the dark, for the moment our vigilance slips, dwelling in the neglected corners of the world and the unlit corridors of the mind. This pilgrimage into the wild, it was meant as sanctuary. Just myself, my brother Miles, and our companions, Reese and Cora. We'd gathered provisions, shouldered our packs, hearts thrumming with the promise of untamed terrain, a respite from the city's ceaseless static, the tyranny of glowing screens. The prospect of severance, of being utterly unreachable, held a potent charm. We were no strangers to the woods, but this venture plunged deeper, guided by coordinates miles unearthed from some obscure wilderness forum. Remote, undisturbed, devoid of casual wanderers, the very isolation we craved. The journey itself was an ascent into solitude, the car navigating serpentine mountain capillaries that seemed to spool out infinitely. When the engine finally fell silent at the trailhead, the air struck cool, sharp, saturated with the resinous perfume of pine. No signal bars, no other vehicles, only the immense breathing forest embracing us. Perfection. For perhaps an hour, we trekked, banter echoing lightly between the trees, the weight of sustenance and shelter strapped to our backs a comforting burden. Liberation pulsed in the simple act of walking, of shedding the urban skin. The path eventually unfurled into a modest clearing, hemmed by colossal trees standing like ancient columns. Nearby, a creek murmured its ceaseless liquid song, amplifying the profound tranquility. Tents rose, wood was gathered, and we surrendered to the anticipated ease of a night beneath a canopy of stars. Twilight bled across the sky, deepening the shadows as we huddled near the burgeoning fire, charring marshmallows, voices weaving tales both significant and slight. Darkness descended swiftly, absolute save for the fire's capricious dance and the distant, indifferent glitter of constellations. A silence settled, vast and profound, utterly alien to city ears, a stillness bordering on the unnerving. At some point, Miles rose, murmuring about investigating something near the water's edge. His absence was brief, yet upon his return, a subtle dissonance marked his features. "Anyone," he began, his tone hushed, oddly taut, "go down by the creek earlier?" A collective negative murmur. None had strayed near the water since our arrival. "Footprints," Miles stated, his gaze sweeping the encroaching gloom beyond the firelight's reach. "Large ones." My initial thought was jest, a prelude to some manufactured fright, but the gravity etched onto his face dispelled that notion. His seriousness was genuine, and it pricked me with a sudden, sharp unease. "Probably a bear," Reese offered, a shrug attempting nonchalance. "Or just some hiker passing through before we got here." "Perhaps," Miles conceded, though the uncertainty lingered in his eyes, a visible shadow. The remainder of the evening unfolded without overt incident, yet an intangible tension now permeated the air. Each desiccated twig snapping under unseen weight, every rustle of foliage in the dark periphery sent my gaze darting nervously. "Imagination," I chided myself. "The woods are alive with sound." Eventually, we retreated, cocooning ourselves within nylon walls, the forest resuming its quietude, punctuated only by a far-off owl's query or the sigh of wind through the high branches. Deep in the night, consciousness surfaced abruptly. No distinct sound had pulled me from sleep, rather an internal alarm, that primal sense of wrongness. My tent, a close space, held the soft rhythm of Miles's breathing beside me. All seemed placid, yet the feeling persisted, a knot tightening in my gut. Silently, I worked the zipper, easing my head out into the chill air. The fire had dwindled to pulsing embers, casting a weak, spectral glow across our small encampment. Trees loomed, immense silhouettes against the lesser dark, their limbs stirring gently. And then I saw them. Impressions in the soft earth. Not confined to the creek bank this time, but describing a circuit around our tents. Unmistakably large, disturbingly clear. My pulse hammered against my ribs as I slipped outside, feet bare on the cool ground, trying to comprehend the scene. The prints were too substantial for any of us, their freshness undeniable in the faint light. Someone or something had prowled the perimeter while we slept. Crouching, I traced the outline of one impression, the depth suggesting significant weight, a heavy presence. My eyes scanned the surrounding darkness, half expecting to meet another gaze, but there was only the silent congregation of trees and the overwhelming, watchful stillness. I retreated back into the tent, quiet as a breath, mind churning. Wake the others. Alert them to what? Footprints? The evidence felt both damning and inconclusive. Perhaps there was a mundane explanation I couldn't grasp in my sleep-addled state. Sleep, however, remained elusive. I lay rigid, attuned to every minute nocturnal sound. The image of those deep tracks seared into my thoughts. Morning arrived, and I kept my discovery locked behind my teeth. Why incite panic over impressions in the dirt that might resolve into something innocuous? A late-night hiker, a large mammal. My fear felt excessive in the daylight. We dedicated the day to exploration, tracing trails deeper into the woods, marveling at a hidden cascade tumbling over moss-slicked rocks. The beauty was undeniable, the peace almost restorative, yet the sensation of being observed, a prickle on the neck, never entirely dissipated. Occasionally, I saw Miles cast furtive glances into the dense undergrowth, the same tautness in his posture mirroring my own internal strain. That evening, gathered once more around the fire, the atmosphere was palpably altered. Laughter felt forced, conversation lagged, an unspoken anxiety hummed beneath the surface, a shared awareness of something amiss that no one dared articulate. After a time, Reese stretched, announcing his intention to retire. Long hike planned tomorrow. He yawned. We murmured assent. The day's exertions had taken their toll. As we prepared to zip ourselves into our respective shelters, my gaze snagged on something new. More prints, not merely circling this time, but leading definitively away from the camp, originating from just beyond the firelight's edge, disappearing into the black woods. They were starkly fresh, chillingly recent. "Miles," I whispered, beckoning him with a subtle nod. He followed my line of sight, and the color drained from his face as he registered the tracks. "We have to leave," he breathed, the words barely audible. "Now." There was no room for argument. The wrongness had solidified, become undeniable. Staying felt like tempting a fate we couldn't comprehend. We began packing with stealthy haste, reluctant to disturb Reese and Cora prematurely. But as we moved, a sound fractured the night's quiet, a low, guttural growl emanating from the impenetrable darkness between the trees. We froze, gazes locked on the black void. It came again, closer, resonant, sending an icy current up my spine. This was no bear. This sound held a different quality, something ancient and hostile. "Wake them," Miles urged, his voice tight with tremor. I roused Reese and Cora, my own forced calm failing as I relayed the situation. Their sleep-fogged confusion yielded quickly to the raw fear likely evident in my tone. Snatching our remaining gear, we plunged onto the return trail, the menacing growls still vibrating through the woods behind us. My heart felt like a frantic bird trapped in my chest. My mind conjured monstrous shapes in the peripheral gloom. Every shadow writhed, every rustle threatened pursuit. Then, as abruptly as it began, the growling ceased. An unnerving silence fell, thick and expectant. I kept glancing back, anticipating a charge from the tree line, but nothing emerged. We stumbled onward in strained silence, the crunch of our boots on the leaf litter the only sound piercing the tension. It felt like an eternity before the familiar shape of the car materialized through the trees. Gear was flung haphazardly into the trunk, doors slammed shut, sealing us inside a fragile metal shell. Miles's hands trembled as he jammed the key into the ignition, the engine roaring to life. Headlights sliced through the darkness, illuminating the empty trailhead. Nothing, just the silent, impassive woods. We drove for a long time without speaking, the miles accumulating between us and the clearing, gradually loosening the knot of terror. Yet, the feeling persisted, that chilling certainty of having been watched, of having brushed against something ancient and unseen that resided deep within those woods. What stalked us that night remains an unanswered question, a chilling enigma. Perhaps it was merely an animal of unusual size and aggression, or perhaps it was something other, something the wilderness guards in its deepest folds, something not meant for human eyes. I only know that the memory of those woods remains, sharp and unsettling, and I harbor no desire to ever tread that path again. That harp, I recall the precise instant it swam into my awareness, adrift in the attic's dusty sea. I was navigating drifts of forgotten belongings, hunting a derelict chair that begged mending. Dislodging a stack of brittle quilts from a shadowed corner revealed it, a towering shape shrouded in a grimed sheet. As the fabric fell away, the harp materialized. It stood sentinel, cloaked in years of settled dust, its pillar and base intricately scrolled with wooden filigree. Thick strings, veiled in cobwebs, stretched taut across its frame. An immediate, potent urge surged through me to sweep away the neglect, to coax even a whisper of resonance from its silent throat. My heart knocked against my ribs. The air tasted thick and ancient on my tongue. Alone I stood, under the weak interrogation of a single bare bulb that steeped the cluttered space in perpetual twilight. Tentatively, my fingers grazed the strings, stiff, resistant, yet they shivered beneath my touch, a vibration that lingered unnervingly, a faint electrical hum persisting in my hands long after contact ceased. I wrestled the instrument toward the center of the room, nearly colliding with a listing, unsteady desk. Floorboards groaned their protest under the shifting weight. Heavier than its elegant form suggested, the harp demanded a strained effort, my back protesting as I maneuvered it across the rough planks. Dust, disturbed, filled my nostrils, triggering a sharp sneeze. I tried shallow breaths, a futile defense against the swirling particles. Finally positioned near a mullioned window, I wrestled open the shutters, inviting a shaft of revealing sunlight. The harsh light catalogued every scar, each worn patch on the venerable wood. It possessed an aura of antiquity, of value, despite its obvious abandonment. Later, as evening bled into the house, I brought the harp downstairs, seeking the clarity of better light. Under the warm glow of the living room lamp, I situated it near the cold hearth, perching on a stool to investigate its potential voice. My initial plucking yielded only random, dissonant thuds from strings hopelessly out of tune. My fingers, clumsy initiates, fumbled across them. My musical history was scant, a smattering of childhood piano lessons, nothing more. I persisted, worrying the strings until a dull ache bloomed in my fingertips. The house settled into profound quiet. My eyelids grew heavy as anchors. Surrendering, I left the harp standing silent sentinel and sought my bed, extinguishing the lights, hoping for oblivion. Around the bone-deep stillness of 3 a.m., a low, resonant hum vibrated me awake. My heart seized, a jolt of ice water sluicing through my veins. A passing truck, distant thunder. My mind grasped for mundane explanations. Then, a fleeting cascade of notes, soft yet utterly distinct, cut through the silence. I sat bolt upright, spine rigid, ears straining, every nerve tuned to the darkness. The timbre was unmistakable. The harp. Downstairs. Slipping from bed, my bare feet recoiled from the chill floorboards as I crept toward the hallway, navigating by feel, unwilling to break the spell with electric light. Another brief chord progression shimmered, then dissolved into silence. I paused at the living room threshold, peering into the gloom. The fireplace remained dark. Moonlight, filtered through the window pane, sculpted the harp's silhouette against the shadows. It stood immobile, yet the very air around it seemed to crackle, imbued with a latent energy. My hand found the switch, flooding the room with light. Everything appeared ordinary. I approached the instrument. The strings hung motionless. No draft stirred the air. Perspiration slicked my palms, my pulse a frantic drummer against my skin. A dream, perhaps, I whispered inwardly, a phantom echo of my earlier efforts. I lingered for several minutes, watchful, but the stillness held. Retreating to bed, sleep remained elusive, my thoughts tethered obstinately to the enigmatic harp. The following day became dedicated to coaxing harmony from the aged instrument. Ignorant of proper technique, I consulted brief video tutorials on my phone. Rummaging again in the attic yielded a small, tarnished tuning key, doubtless a relic from a previous custodian. Patiently, meticulously, I adjusted each string. The process was laborious. The pegs resisted, stiff with age and disuse. My arms grew weary, but gradually most strings began to yield clearer, more agreeable pitches. The sound now held a pleasing resonance. I attempted simple scales, my technique awkward, fingers sliding uncertainly. Still, the depth of its voice captivated me. That night, it sang again. Longer this time, the notes weaving into a slow, deliberate sequence. I was wrenched from slumber, instantly alert, heart hammering like a forge inside my chest. No hesitation now. Tossing aside the blankets, I strode directly to the living room. Turning the corner, I confronted the harp. The atmosphere felt charged, thick with static. The faintest echo of the final note still hung in the air, a ghostly reverberation. Goose flesh prickled my arms. The hairs on my nape stiffened. I flicked on the lamp. The harp appeared unchanged, yet was that a faint shimmer on one particular string, as if freshly disturbed? Reaching out, my finger met the faintest residual vibration. A knot of cold dread tightened in my stomach. Rooted to the spot, I stared, mind racing. Then, acting on impulse, I seized a nearby notebook and pen, attempting to capture the ethereal sequence, matching tones against the piano app on my phone. My hand trembled as I scribbled. A strange compulsion drove me, a need to document this inexplicable phenomenon, as if notation held the key to understanding. The next day, I tried reproducing the transcribed notes on the harp itself. Matching the exact pattern proved elusive, yet fragments of the somber, melancholic chords emerged under my fumbling fingers. As I played them, a peculiar tingling spread through me. My breath grew shallow, and the distinct sensation of being observed crept over my skin. That night ushered in a dream of startling verisimilitude. I found myself within a vast, opulent ballroom, its floors polished to a mirror sheen. Figures in elaborate formal wear, tailcoats, flowing gowns, long gloves, drifted through the space, conversing in muted tones. Fashions of a bygone era. I stood apart, an unseen observer in a corner. Harp music, resonant and clear, filled the hall, though its source remained hidden. When I awoke, drenched in sweat, sheets twisted like bindings around my legs. My heart pounded erratically. Panting, I sat up, gulping water, trying to dispel the vivid images clinging to my mind. In the nights that followed, the harp's autonomous performances grew more frequent, sometimes a solitary resonant chord, other times brief melodic phrases. Each instance drew me from sleep, compelled me to record the notes in my burgeoning logbook, meticulously noting the time, always between the spectral hours of 2 and 4. Exhaustion began to fray my edges. A persistent restlessness settled upon me during the day. My hands developed a slight chronic tremor whenever my thoughts strayed to the harp. Social invitations went unanswered. A magnetic pull kept me tethered to the house, to the instrument, anticipating the next manifestation. I began attempting more intricate pieces, though I possessed no sheet music specific to the harp. Internet searches yielded generic compositions, none echoing the nocturnal melodies that haunted my sleep and my waking hours. Then came another discovery. While practicing a simple folk tune late one afternoon, my gaze caught on faint inscriptions near the apex of the harp's column. Weathered markings, almost erased by time's passage. Leaning closer, I squinted, but the characters remained elusive, resembling archaic symbols, perhaps integral to the original ornamentation. An odd insistence emanated from them, as if the harp willed me to notice. I tried a pencil rubbing, laying paper against the wood, but the impression was indistinct. The secrets withheld. Frustrated, I returned to my practice. That night, near the customary hour of 3, I was jolted awake by a longer, more complex melody. It flowed with an unnerving fluidity. An intricate pattern played with the confidence of a seasoned musician. Heart hammering against my ribs, I rushed to the living room. The notes continued, clear and unwavering. I watched, transfixed, as the strings visibly quivered in the faint illumination filtering from the street lamp, plucked by unseen fingers. Cold sweat beaded on my forehead, my shirt clinging damply to my back. The melody, hauntingly beautiful, persisted for nearly a full minute. As silence fell, I transcribed the sequence, my handwriting a barely legible scrawl. A wave of dizziness washed over me. This performance catalyzed more detailed dreams. The ballroom returned, but now I moved through it, inhaling the ghostly scents of perfume and cologne, hearing the crisp tap of unseen shoes on the polished floor. The other attendees glided past, their gazes sliding through me as if I were mere air. The harp music persisted, a constant, unseen presence. My own breath felt constricted within the dream's confines. It shattered when I attempted to approach a man in a dark, old-fashioned suit. He turned, his face utterly blank, and I awoke gasping, throat raw. Rest offered no respite. The sheets were soaked anew. A singular focus gripped me, mastering that longer, intricate melody. The following day was consumed by piecing together my fragmented notations, replaying phrases, straining to recall elusive passages. Frustration mounted, simmering into an aggressive determination. My fingertips grew raw, protesting the constant friction against the strings. My lower back throbbed from hours spent hunched over the instrument. I disregarded the discomfort. This melody felt like a cipher, a puzzle demanding solution, promising understanding of the dreams, the midnight concerts, the growing unease that permeated my existence. My obsession spiraled. Chores lay forgotten. Meals became perfunctory, a sandwich clutched in one hand, notebook in the other, scribbling notations between bites. Distracted, consumed by chord progressions, I stumbled over furniture. Sleep deprivation etched dark hollows beneath my eyes. my neck muscles knotted into painful cords. Hours were lost crawling on the floor around the harp, searching for hidden compartments, more elusive markings, tapping the wood, listening for hollow resonations. Nothing. On the fourth night after first hearing the full melody, I managed to play a recognizable rendition during daylight hours. The moment the final note faded, an intense compulsion drew my eyes back to the markings. Grabbing a flashlight, I aimed its beam at the harp's summit, scrutinizing the faint symbols. This time, letters emerged from the ambiguity, characters from an unfamiliar, archaic script, illegible, yet undeniably present. My mouth turned to dust. Vertigo threatened, forcing me to steady myself against the harp. The wood beneath my palm felt unnaturally warm, radiating a subtle internal heat. My pulse surged, a frantic tattoo against my eardrums. My hands shook uncontrollably. That night, silence reigned. The harp remained inert. I kept vigil in the living room, eyes fixed on the strings, anticipating movement, sound. Nothing. Around 4:30 a.m., exhaustion finally claimed me on the couch. The ballroom dream enveloped me instantly. This time, I stood at the very center of the vast floor. The music emanated from somewhere behind me. Figures swirled past, their faces averted. My gaze locked onto a large, ornate mirror dominating one corner. An invisible force pulled me toward it. As I drew closer, my reflection materialized. Me, yet clad in the same antiquated formal wear as the spectral dancers. Staring into my own altered image, a wave of pure panic crashed over me. I awoke violently, clutching a couch cushion, breath tearing through my lungs. My throat felt parched. I stumbled to the kitchen for water, then splashed my face repeatedly at the bathroom sink. The next day, I attempted the full piece once more. Halfway through, I noticed the strings seemed different, imbued with a strange luminosity in the afternoon sun. A tightness constricted my chest. The urge to stop, to flee, was almost overwhelming. I forced myself onward, fingers moving mechanically through the familiar sequence. Upon completion, I hastily jotted down subtle variations I'd perceived in the notes. My phone buzzed. A text message. Ignored. No distractions allowed. I plucked the strings again, my arms trembling, breath coming in shallow gasps. Repeating the piece, a powerful vibration suddenly emanated from the harp. It surged through my hands, up my arms, resonating deep within my chest. My vision momentarily blurred. Blinking hard, I struggled to focus. The strings continued to hum long after my fingers had stilled. A faint, harmonic echo lingered in the room. Clammy sweat broke out across my skin. I stepped back uncertainly, fearing I might collapse. Gradually, the vibration subsided, leaving an unnerving silence in its wake. Setting the harp down with meticulous care, I retreated into the hallway, legs unsteady, leaning against the cool wall. My head throbbed, a band of tension tightening around my skull. I fought to regulate my breathing. A persistent ringing filled my ears. The thought of calling someone, of escaping the house, flickered through my mind, but died unspoken. I was too deeply entangled now. Leaving the harp felt impossible, disposing of it unthinkable. Answers lay within its enigmatic presence, within the cryptic dreams it summoned. I had to see more. I resolved to spend the subsequent nights in the living room, sleeping fitfully on the couch. An alarm, set for hourly intervals, ensured I wouldn't miss any nocturnal activity. My sleep fractured into useless shards. Each morning found me more depleted. Yet, the harp remained stubbornly silent. Doubt began to creep in. Was it over? My anxiety, however, remained at fever pitch. My hands trembled constantly. My reflection stared back, gaunt and hollow-eyed, dark circles blooming beneath. My jaw ached from unconscious clenching during the broken nights. On the 7th night of my self-imposed vigil, it returned. Around 3:30 a.m., the chord struck louder this time, imbued with a raw urgency. I bolted upright from the couch, heart slamming against my ribs. The strings danced under unseen command. Reaching for my notebook, I fumbled, knocking it to the floor. A muttered curse escaped my lips as I retrieved it. By the time pen was poised, the melody was nearing its conclusion. I recognized it, the piece I had painstakingly learned, the one that seemed to bridge worlds. My entire being felt attuned to the notes, vibrating in sympathetic resonance. Then, abruptly, the music ceased. The air grew thick, heavy. A faint metallic tang coated my tongue, as if I'd inhaled something alien. I held my breath, listening. The strings stilled. My gaze flew instinctively to the harp's summit, to the faint, enigmatic markings. Now, bathed in the dim glow of the single lamp I'd left burning, they stood out with startling clarity. A message etched in an unknown tongue, yet undeniably real. My stomach churned. I realized my knuckles were white, gripping the pen with bruising force. Setting it down, I reached out, touching the pillow with trembling fingertips. The wood pulsed with that familiar, uncanny warmth. My heart pounded, each beat echoing in my ears. Forcing myself to withdraw my hand, I backed away, switched off the lamp, and sank onto the couch, staring into the darkness. Sleep was now an impossibility. And so I sit here, still captive in the living room, the harp a silent, potent presence beside me. My eyes trace its form, waiting for a sign, a quiver, a note. Arms crossed tightly, a restless energy thrumming in my limbs, I listen to the shallow cadence of my own breath. Thoughts circle endlessly around the dreams, the music, the inexplicable pull this instrument exerts, drawing me towards some other time, some other place beyond the reach of logic. The compulsion to play, to master every nuance, every chord, remains undiminished. What awaits at the end of that path, I cannot fathom, yet turning away feels like a betrayal, an impossibility. My eyelids burn with fatigue, but determination hardens within me. Tonight, I will remain here, watching, listening, waiting for the harp's next utterance. Unease coils deep within me, a cold serpent, but I will not leave. I must see this through. My flat, I'd always believed, was too compact, too prosaic to harbor secrets of a spectral nature. Just the 4 rooms, connected by a breadth of a hallway. I keep things sparse, uncluttered. Comfort, usually, is my only roommate. But these past weeks, something aberrant unfolds nightly, trailing the steam from my shower. Not mere plumbing groans or the settling sighs of an old building. No, this is a presence articulated in sound, an unnerving resonance I can no longer ignore. A phantom tread, bare like my own, mirroring my every step across the floorboards. Initially, a figment perhaps. Self-deception wears thin. Now, the floor itself bears witness. Twin sets of damp impressions bloom in my wake. Mine and those of something else. I reside alone, nested on the 2nd floor of a structure showing its venerable age. The lift groans a metallic protest, so the stairs are my usual ascent. My door yields directly into the living space, modest furnishings, a settee, a low table, a screen perched on its stand. To the left, a galley kitchen, barely adequate. A short corridor burrows back towards sleep and ablutions. Not grand, but sufficient. A year I've called it home, a year undisturbed by the peculiar. Evenings are for showering, a ritual born of work days that leave me coated in grime or sweat. Afterward, no slippers, no sandals. I favor the cool kiss of the tile underfoot, the slight dampness trailing from me. The first tremor of the uncanny arrived perhaps a fortnight ago. Towel cinched, I emerged from the steam-fogged bathroom, heading kitchenward for water. A soft slap, out of sync with my own footfalls, registered. I paused, listening into the apartment's quiet hum. Silence answered. A shrug, a step onward. Returning towards the living room, it echoed again, that faint, wet percussion, as if from unseen bare feet padding just behind. I froze, breath held captive. Stillness, water dripping from my hair, I reasoned. The tile, perhaps, complaining under my weight. I let it go. The following evening, returning late, the sequence repeated. Shower, bare feet, movement through the flat. This time, vigilance was my shadow. That extra step haunted my thoughts. I listened acutely, walking from bathroom to bedroom. My feet. Tap, tap, tap. And then, reliably, fractionally delayed, its echo. Tap. I spun, towel flaring with the sudden motion. The corridor stretched empty. My pulse thrummed in the quiet. Lowering my gaze, I scanned the floor. One set of damp prints. Mine. Only mine. A sigh escaped, tight with forced relief. Days bled into nights, and the phantom tread grew bolder, more frequent. Post-shower, my steps invariably acquired their spectral partner. Close, yet perpetually just beyond the periphery. Enough to feel pursued, never enough to glimpse the pursuer. Unease coiled in my gut. I tried quickening my pace. The echo matched it. Sometimes I'd break into a run, slamming the bedroom door, ear pressed against the wood. The flat would fall utterly silent beyond the barrier. I'd wait, breath suspended, heart hammering against my ribs until the pressure became unbearable. One night, resolve hardening, I inspected the living room floor. I paced a tight circle before the settee. My wet tracks gleamed on the tile, and then, nestled beside them, tracing my path, were fainter marks. Footprint-shaped, nearly my size, but lighter, as if already kissed by evaporation. I crouched, heart stuttering. My hand reached out, brushing the tile near these ephemeral impressions. Cool, damp, as if vacated mere seconds before. My gaze swept the room, empty. A tremor started in my hand. I rose slowly, commanding my breath to steady. From then on, attention preceded even stepping from the shower. I'd finish rinsing, then pause, hand hovering over the handle, dreading the threshold. Standing there, dripping onto the bath mat, towel clutched like a shield, gathering the nerve to emerge. But clothes awaited. So I'd push through the fear, open the door, step into the hall, and each time, the ritual repeated. My walk, its soft trailing echo, the backward glance revealing nothing. It followed me, kitchen, living room, bedroom, maintaining its unnerving distance, forever just out of sight. A few days passed, it escalated. I was in the kitchen, coaxing eggs into scrambled submission, toast browning nearby. Showered earlier, still barefoot. Standing at the stove, I heard it, the slap on the tile. Closer now, much closer. I turned, nothing. But there, beside my own feet, stark against the linoleum, lay a fresh, wet footprint, pointing my way as if someone had just sidled up beside me. The spatula clattered from my grasp. My stomach lurched, adrenaline surged, cold and sharp. My palms grew slick. I stumbled back a step, two, watching as another footprint bloomed into existence beside the first, materializing from nothing. No drip from above, no conceivable source. It simply appeared. My mouth was dust. Mechanically, I grabbed a paper towel, pressed it onto the prints, seeking some mundane explanation, a hidden leak. The paper merely soaked through. I balled it up, tossed it, switched off the stove, and fled the kitchen, dinner forgotten. Sleep that night was a shallow, brittle thing. Every creak of the old building snagged my attention, tightening muscles. I lay staring at the ceiling's geography of shadows, drifting off, finally, only to jerk awake hours later, convinced of a presence looming beside the bed. I lunged for the lamp, twisting wildly. Empty space greeted me, sweat beaded on my skin, my mouth arid. Imagination, I insisted, but the conviction felt hollow. Something was deeply wrong. Morning brought a meticulous inspection. Every corner probed, every pipe traced, every surface examined for water damage. Nothing. The apartment was sound, dry, ordinary, except in the bathroom. Before the sink, two sets of footprints marred the floor. One undeniably mine. The other, fainter, yet the same size, displayed that unsettling parallel track, always beside my own. I scrubbed the floor with fierce determination, a futile hope that cleansing the evidence would erase the cause. Several nights later, the frayed edge of my endurance snapped. Enough. I would stride into the living room post-shower, pivot with speed, and confront whatever specter dogged my steps. I stood in the bathroom, psyching myself up, legs trembling slightly, breath ragged. 1, 2, 3. I threw open the door, moving rapidly across the hall into the living room's center. I spun, heart a frantic drum. At first, only my own glistening prints. Then, right beside them, I watched, frozen, as another set materialized, step by aqueous step, perfectly tracing my path, forming from unseen reservoirs, leaving slick, dark marks on the tile. No body, no shadow, nothing. My chest constricted, fists clenched. I stood utterly still, breathing arrested, blood roaring in my ears. My eyes darted upward, half expecting a shape, a face, only air. I took a hesitant step towards the bathroom. Instantly, the footsteps sounded again, impossibly close behind. I whipped around. Vacancy. The floor held only the twin trails of prints. I retreated backward, facing the empty space before me. Logic screamed impossibility, yet reality unfolded regardless. My back struck the bathroom doorframe. I nearly buckled. Fumbling for the knob, I scrambled inside, slamming the door, thumbing the lock, a useless gesture against the intangible. My hands shook violently. My heart hammered painfully. I slid down the door to the cool tile, pressing my back against the tub, drawing my knees to my chest. I remained there, adrift in time, focused solely on regaining control of my breath. When I finally emerged, no fresh prints appeared, but the apartment felt charged, expectant, holding its breath until my vigilance waned. I spent the night on the settee, lights blazing, the television murmuring low. Every flicker of my eyelids conjured the image of those footprints forming behind me. These last few days, the extra prints have become migratory. Sometimes they precede me, waiting in the living room near the settee, or lurking beneath the coffee table when I round the corner. Other times, the sound itself penetrates the shower's sanctuary, a damp, heavy tread just beyond the bathroom door. I've forsaken the hallway light. Its occasional flicker adds a cinematic horror I can do without. My mind scrabbles for explanation. A trick of perception? Stress? I've trolled the internet. Structural anomalies, optical illusions, dissociative states. Nothing accounts for wet footprints materializing before my very eyes. Calling a friend feels impossible. How to voice this creeping madness? It sounds unhinged. And a darker thought persists. Would involving someone else, having them two walk barefoot here, invite the phenomenon to spread, to worsen? Now stepping from the bathroom is an act freighted with primal fear. A constant low-level hum of anticipated contact, of something reaching out. My nerves are raw wires. Appetite has fled. Sleep offers little refuge. The footsteps have gained volume, confidence. Last night, I could have sworn I heard a subtle scuff, the brush of something solid against the tile, right at my heels. The turn revealed only the familiar prints. This entity, this walker. It feels like it's closing in. The prints appear more frequently, seem bolder, wetter, leaving larger patches of dampness. I've taken to wearing socks indoors, a pathetic defense. The phantom prints remain bare, a mocking counterpoint. Tonight finds me huddled on the settee, thumbs tapping this account into my phone, a need to chronicle, to anchor the unbelievable. I feel it poised any second now. That wet slap will announce its presence. My palms sweat. Breath comes shallow. My gaze keeps snagging on the hallway entrance, anticipating the sight of those impressions blooming on the tile. An image surfaces, turning suddenly and finding it standing there, watching. Am I prepared for that revelation? No running. This is my space. I won't be chased out by phantom footfalls. Yet, to claim I'm not terrified would be a profound lie. A flashlight rests beside me, a talisman of uncertain power. Light banishes shadows, not spectral dampness, but it's a meager comfort against the solitude. From the bathroom, the faint rhythmic drip of the showerhead persists, usually innocuous. Tonight, menacing. Each drop anticipates the other sound. My body is a knot of tension, neck aching from constant backward glances. Maybe I should just look, confront it directly. Perhaps seeing, knowing, is better than this gnawing uncertainty. Living like this, flinching at every sound, is unsustainable. If I see something, I'll know. If not, perhaps the rational mind can reclaim some ground. I'm going to stand, walk into the hallway, check. A quick turn perhaps, to catch it unawares. Right, up now. Legs feel like water, but they obey. Heartbeat thunders. My own breath sounds unnaturally loud. I reach the hallway's edge. Quiet, save for the bathroom drip. Bare feet cold on the tile. I step forward. 1, 2. There. The wet slap behind me. I spin, flashlight beam stabbing the space where the sound originated. I see it, the glistening footprint still resolving itself into existence beside my own. Nobody here. My stomach clenches violently. Breath catches. Another print begins to form, inches from the first. The light illuminates nothing but empty air. My grip on the flashlight tightens, knuckles white. I cannot remain silent. My voice emerges, a ragged tremor. What do you want? No reply. Only the relentless drip, drip, drip from the bathroom, heart pounding against my ribs. I take a step back. The second set of footprints mirrors my retreat, maintaining their disturbing proximity. Gooseflesh prickles across my entire body. Run! My instincts scream, but my legs are leaden. This thing, I sense, won't cease until confronted. But how does one confront the invisible, an entity known only by its damp passage? I stand rooted, flashlight beams sweeping frantically, searching for form, for outline. Nothing. Yet the prints continue their silent arrival. So close now, right beside me. I swallow, hard, dredging up courage from some depleted well, and take another step. The phantom steps match mine in perfect, chilling synchronicity. I turn again, light aimed directly behind. A sudden rush of cold air washes over me, impossible in the sealed hallway. My skin crawls, my spine tingles. I pivot back, and my breath hitches. Those footprints are forming again, but now they appear ahead of me, right where my next step is meant to land. The final shred of denial evaporates. I am not alone in this apartment. Something is here, pacing beside me, mimicking my every move, leaving its inexplicable wet signature upon my floor. And if I turn fast enough, just one more time perhaps, I will finally see its face. The cough of the engine became a death rattle, then silence descended, absolute and profound. My automobile, a faithless vessel, surrendered its momentum, sighing onto the grit-strewn verge of a road that bled into nowhere. In that instant, the geography of my predicament became starkly clear. Marooned, leagues from any recognizable point on a map, tethered to a silent carcass of steel, the ether devoid of signal. This mechanical failure, however, was merely the overture to a symphony of dread I could not yet fathom. My name is Elias. What follows is not merely a recounting of a journey gone awry, but the testament of a soul dragged through a darkness previously confined to whispers and nightmares. A simple pilgrimage to my sister's nuptials, a shortcut carved through the land's forgotten arteries, promised efficiency. The panorama unfurled in swathes of undulating verdure, dense copses of trees standing like ancient sentinels, and lonely homesteads pinned against the vastness. Yet, as the sun bled ochre and crimson across the horizon, stretching shadows into skeletal fingers, the pastoral charm curdled, replaced by an unnerving stillness that swallowed sound itself. Hours had dissolved into the relentless hum of tires on asphalt before the machine beneath me began its protest. A frantic pulse illuminated the dashboard. The vehicle bucked, stuttered, a mechanical beast in its throes. I wrestled it to the shoulder just as its heart gave out. Lifting the bonnet revealed a baffling labyrinth of wires and conduits, an alien anatomy far beyond my rudimentary understanding. Mechanical arts were a language I'd never learned. Defeated, I sought refuge in technology, retrieving my phone. Predictably, the screen displayed only mocking emptiness. No bars. Assistance, it seemed, would require a more archaic approach. Far down the ribbon of road, a faint luminescence pricked the deepening twilight. Perhaps a farmhouse, distant by half a mile or so. Scarcely ideal, yet it represented the sole prospect of a working telephone, or at minimum, guidance toward the nearest hamlet. As I trod the gravel path, the silence became a physical pressure. The familiar chorus of nocturnal insects was absent. Only the crunch of my own footfalls and the ragged rhythm of my breath disturbed the void. The structure loomed larger, resolving into an edifice of age, its timber skin weathered, its porch roof bowed with time. Lamplight spilled from within, however, and the silhouette of an old pickup truck stood sentinel nearby. Someone resided here. My hand hovered near the front door, my plea for aid rehearsed silently. But before knuckles could meet wood, voices seeped through the barrier, indistinct yet laced with a tension that arrested my movement. "We cannot sustain this," a woman's voice, frayed at the edges, lamented. "Discovery is inevitable." "No one discovers anything," a man's rough timbre retorted. "We exercise caution, always." "But the risk..." Her words were abruptly severed by the clumsy clatter of an empty can my foot had nudged on the porch. Inside, the voices ceased instantly. I froze, breath caught in my throat, acutely aware of my intrusion upon something private, perhaps perilous. The door creaked inward, framing a figure tall and broad, his face a canvas of hard lines and exposure, his eyes chips of glacial ice. His gaze swept over me, appraising, inscrutable. "Something I can do for you?" The question was purely functional, stripped of any genuine offer of aid. I forced moisture into my dry mouth, attempting a conciliatory smile. "Deeply sorry to impose, truly. My car expired back up the road, maybe half a mile. I was hoping perhaps I could trouble you to use your telephone. Call for a tow truck." The man held my gaze for a protracted moment, his eyes flicking momentarily towards someone unseen within the house's depths. When he looked back, a subtle, unnerving light sparked in his pupils, chilling me despite the mild evening air. "Certainly," he declared, his tone suddenly, jarringly amiable. "Can't abide leaving a fellow stranded. Step inside." Every primal instinct shrieked a warning, urged retreat. But necessity is a cruel master. I needed succor. This was the only font available. I crossed the threshold, the floorboards groaning a somber welcome beneath my weight. The interior was shrouded in low light, cluttered, the air thick with an indefinable odor, sickly sweet, almost floral, yet underscored by a persistent note of decay. A woman materialized in a kitchen doorway, nervously wiping her hands on a cloth. Her smile was a taut line, failing utterly to warm her eyes. "Telephone's through here," the man indicated, ushering me deeper into the dwelling. As we passed the woman, I saw the stark white of her knuckles clenching the rag. Her gaze met mine fleetingly, and in that brief contact, I glimpsed an emotion starkly resembling terror. The kitchen was cavernous, dominated by a colossal wood-burning stove, but my attention snagged on something else: the cellar door. It was unusually robust, fortified with multiple external locks. An oddity. Locks belong inside cellars, surely. The man gestured towards an antiquated rotary phone mounted on the wall. "Help yourself. Got the number for roadside assistance?" I hadn't, but the operator was my intended intermediary. Lifting the heavy receiver, I registered the man positioning himself subtly between me and the path back to the front door. The woman remained a statue in the kitchen doorway, her gaze oscillating between me and the heavily secured cellar entrance. I dialed 0, a silent prayer accompanying the motion. Instead of the anticipated dial tone, there was only a flat, dead finality. The line was inert. "Trouble?" the man inquired, his calmness unnervingly disproportionate. Slowly, I replaced the receiver, my thoughts scrambling for purchase. "Ah, yes, seems the line. It's not operational." He nodded, unsurprised. "Happens. Out this far, storms knock it out." Yet the night sky was a canvas of stars, serene and undisturbed. No storm had passed. "Look," I began, striving to keep the tremor from my voice. "I truly appreciate the hospitality, but perhaps I should just commence walking. Find a service station somewhere." the man's features solidified into granite. Wouldn't recommend that. Not safe. Wandering these roads after dark. Why not stay the night? Got a spare room. Come morning, I'll drive you into town myself. It wasn't an invitation. It was a directive. The way he stood, the finality in his tone. Departure was clearly not sanctioned. That's exceedingly generous, I stammered, mind racing, seeking an escape vector. But I really must press on. My sister's wedding is tomorrow, and My words were violently truncated by a sound that turned my blood to ice water, a muffled, desperate scream emanating from directly beneath our feet. From the cellar, the woman emitted a tiny, choked gasp, instantly suppressed. The man's face contorted, darkening with sudden fury. "Now see what you've prompted," he snarled, all semblance of civility dissolving. "You've disturbed our guest." My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat threatening escape. The certainty crashed down upon me. Failure to exit this house, now, meant permanent residence. I feinted left, then lunged right, aiming for the narrow gap beside him. He moved with deceptive speed. A hand like forged iron clamped onto my arm, and he hurled me against the wall with jarring force. "Cora," he barked at the woman. "Fetch the bindings." I thrashed, kicked, clawed, a cornered creature fighting against overwhelming strength. Within moments, he had me subdued, face pressed against the cool, grimy linoleum. "Should have kept driving," he muttered, cinching ropes tight around my wrists behind my back. "No matter. You'll soon make the acquaintance of our other visitor." As he began dragging me towards the cellar door, my eyes locked onto Cora's face. Tears tracked through the grime on her cheeks, yet she remained immobile, a statue of resignation. Whatever abominations resided beyond that portal, she had long since integrated them into her grim reality. One by one, the locks clicked open. The heavy door groaned wide, releasing a miasma from the Stygian depths, an indescribable compound of stale blood, excrement, and utter hopelessness. As he hauled me down the unseen stairs, I squeezed my eyes shut, convinced I was descending into hell's antechamber. Time lost all meaning in that subterranean prison. Days bled into an indistinguishable morass, punctuated only by the arrival of new guests, the terrified whimpers fading as others vanished entirely. The horrors witnessed, the degradation endured. Language lacks the capacity to convey them. Yet, through the fog of despair, the ember of escape never fully died. Then, one day, chaos provided a sliver of opportunity. A newly captured soul, fighting with the ferocity of the doomed, inflicted an injury upon our captor. In the ensuing pandemonium, I seized my chance. The particulars of my egress are not for polite recounting. Suffice it to say, it was brutal, desperate, and far from clean. But I emerged. Now, relaying this chronicle, I anticipate disbelief. The tale strains credulity, seems too monstrous for the mundane world. Yet, I swear upon my fractured sanity, every syllable is truth. That farmhouse remains, nestled on some forsaken track, swallowed by indifference. Silas and Cora persist, curators of their ghastly collection, waiting for the next unfortunate traveler. So, should your engine ever fail you in the vast, lonely spaces, pause before seeking shelter from the nearest light. Reflect on my words, for you cannot know what particular circle of hell awaits behind a welcoming door. And once invited in, the cost of leaving may be everything you possess.